In the summer of 1856, a door was opened beneath a Tennessee plantation. It was not meant to be found. It sat level with the ground, hidden under dirt, straw, and years of careful walking. No handle, no sign, just a thin line in the soil where would met earth, as if the land itself had been stitched shut. The men who uncovered it were not looking for children. They were looking for a missing mule. When the shovel struck iron, they thought it was old farming scrap. When they brushed away the dirt and saw the outline of a door, they laughed. Someone joked about buried whiskey. Another joked about treasure. Then they pulled. The smell came first. Not rot, not decay, something worse. Stale air that had not moved in years. Damp stone. Human breath, trapped too long. A smell that made grown men step back without knowing why. When the door finally opened, no sound came up from below. No crying. No screaming. No movement. Just darkness. One man lowered a lantern. The light fell into a hollow cut deep into the earth, its walls slick with moisture. The floor was mud. The ceiling was low. And along the far wall, pressed together like animals in a storm, were shapes. Children. 12 of them. Bare feet. Sunken faces. Hair matted close to their scalps. Their eyes reflected the lantern light like glass, wide and empty, as if they had forgotten how blinking worked. None of them spoke. One child tried to stand and fell. Another raised a hand slowly, not in greeting, but in instinctive defense, as if light itself was a punishment. Above them, the fields were green. The sky was open. Birds were singing. Below, time had stopped, and the men standing at the edge of that hole would spend the rest of their lives pretending they had not seen what they saw. Because once you open a door like that, you learn something about your town, and you learn something about yourself. The land above the hidden door belonged to a man named Elias Crow. In 1856, that name meant safety. Crow was not loud. He did not laugh much. He spoke slowly, choosing his words like scripture. People said he was a man of order, a man who feared God, a man who believed children needed discipline more than comfort. He owned one of the largest plantations in the county. His house stood clean and white, set back from the road, always quiet. No music, no guests staying long. No signs of excess. Every Sunday, Elias Crow sat in the front pew. He donated more money than anyone else. He paid for repairs on the church roof. He funded the orphan fund when crops failed and families broke apart. When the preacher spoke about duty, Crow nodded first. People noticed that. When sickness took parents or accidents left children alone, the town often turned to Crow. He knows structure, they said. He will raise them right. He won't let them become a burden. Crow never asked for payment. That made him untouchable. He accepted children quietly. No papers. No fuss. A handshake. A prayer. Sometimes a Bible pressed into a small hand before the wagon rolled away. Mothers cried when they gave their children up. Crow did not. He watched without expression, as if emotion was something to be trained out, not felt. Neighbors rarely saw the children afterward. When asked, Crow said they were being educated, learning scripture, learning silence, learning humility. They are safer not being seen, he once told a church elder. Attention invites corruption. The elder agreed. No one questioned why laughter never came from the Crow house. No one questioned why children's voices were never heard. Because Elias Crow looked like a good man. And in towns like this, that was enough. The children did not arrive all at once. That would have been noticed. They came slowly, one at a time, over years, slipped into Crow's care so gently that no one ever thought to count them. A boy from a farm fire that took his parents in one night. 2 sisters whose father drowned crossing the river in winter. A quiet girl from the church fund who never spoke above a whisper. A child left on the church steps with no name at all. Each time, the town felt relief. Another mouth fed. Another problem solved. In the 1850s, children without families were not considered children for long. They were labor. They were futures that could go wrong. They were risks. Elias Crow took those risks away. He never took children from strong families. Never from homes with fathers who could ask questions. He chose the forgotten ones. The ones no one would come back for. After a while, people noticed something strange. The children were never seen working the fields. Never seen walking to church. Never seen playing in the yard. But Crow had an answer for everything. They are learning restraint. They are kept apart to avoid temptation. They are being prepared for higher service. The words sounded holy. So no one asked why shoes never wore out. Why clothes were never washed on the line. Why no birthdays were remembered? In church records, the children became marks, not names. In the town's memory, they became former concerns. And underground, far below the crops and prayers, the children learned a different lesson. That disappearing did not happen all at once. It happened when people stopped looking. The land behind Elias Crow's plantation looked ordinary. Flat ground, rows of corn, stones stacked where stones had always been. Nothing about it suggested depth. Nothing suggested that the earth below had ever been disturbed. But long before Crow owned the land, men had cut into it. An old limestone dig, abandoned before records were kept. A shallow pit that sloped downward, then folded inward, hidden by time and overgrowth. Most people walked over it without ever knowing it was there. Crow knew. He found it the first year he bought the property. Some said he discovered it by accident. Others said he had been searching. No one could agree. But after that first year, he spent long evenings behind the house, measuring, clearing, sealing. He did not build the place beneath the field. He shaped it. He reinforced the walls, smoothed the stone, set iron bars where the rock grew thin. He added a door cut level with the soil, flush enough to disappear when covered. There was no ladder left behind. Only a rope, lowered and pulled back up. Down there, the air was always wet, cold even in summer. Sound died quickly. A whisper could not travel. A scream could not rise. That was important. Crow believed noise was rebellion. The children were kept in near darkness. Light came only when Crow came. And light, to them, meant rules. They learned to sit still for hours. They learned not to look up unless told. They learned that speaking without permission brought pain. Food came once a day, water less often, just enough to survive, not enough to feel human. Crow called it correction. He told himself he was stripping sin from them, training weakness out, saving their souls through containment. Above ground, crops grew. Church bells rang. Life went on. Below, the children counted time by hunger. And the earth listened to everything. The children learned the rules without ever being told. No one explained them. They were learned through consequence. The first rule was silence. Not quiet, silence. Breathing too loud earned attention. Whispering earned punishment. Crying was the worst offense of all. Crow believed noise invited disorder. When a child cried, he did not rush. He waited, sometimes for hours. Let the fear settle. Let the others understand what was coming. Then the door would open. Light spilled down like fire. The children squeezed their eyes shut, hands rising on instinct. Crow would stand above them, calm, patient, holding the lantern like a judge holds truth. He never shouted. That was another lesson. Punishment was slow, measured, delivered like instruction. Sometimes food was taken away. Sometimes water. Sometimes a child was made to stand alone in the corner where the stone pressed cold against their face for hours, legs shaking, body giving up. Crow called this reflection. The second rule was stillness. Movement suggested thought. Thought suggested disobedience. The children learned to sit shoulder to shoulder, knees drawn in, hands folded tight. They learned to sleep sitting up. They learned to wake without stretching. If one child moved, all were punished. This taught them to watch each other, to correct each other, to become guards inside the dark. The third rule was forgetting. Crow did not use their names. Names, he believed, created attachment. Attachment created resistance. Instead, he numbered them. 1 through 12. Numbers do not cry when you erase them. Over time, the children stopped speaking to each other. Words became dangerous. Memories became heavy. Faces blurred in the dark. Some forgot the sound of their own voice. Some forgot their parents' faces. One forgot his own name before the end of the first year. Above ground, Elias Crow was praised for his discipline. Below ground, discipline hollowed children into shadows. And still, the town noticed nothing. Not all memory dies the same way. Some fades gently, like a face seen too long ago. Some fights. Among the 12, there was one child who did not forget the sun. He had arrived later than the others. Old enough to remember trees. Old enough to remember the sound of water moving freely. Old enough to know that what was happening was wrong. His number was 7. Crow noticed him immediately. 7 did not sit as still as the others. His eyes followed the lantern when it moved. When Crow spoke, 7 listened, not with fear, but with focus. That made Crow uneasy. Memory was dangerous. 7 whispered at night when he thought the others were asleep. Soft words. Broken sentences. He spoke of grass, of warmth, of running. Some children leaned toward him. Crow noticed that too. Punishment followed. 7 was separated, made to stand alone against the stone wall where the damp never dried. Food was withheld longer. Water came less often. Crow believed resistance could be starved out. But something else happened instead. 7 began counting. Not days. Crow controlled those. He counted visits, lantern appearances, footsteps above the door. He learned Crow's patterns, learned how long the door stayed open, learned when the rope was lowered and when it was forgotten. Hope, even thin hope, is loud in silence. One night, after Crow left the door open longer than usual, 7 moved. Just inches, then more. The others froze, watching, terrified to breathe. 7 reached the rope. For the first time in years, a child touched something that led upward. He did not climb. He wrapped the rope around his wrist and waited, because he knew one truth the others had forgotten. The world above still existed, and Crow had grown careless. Not all memory dies the same way. Some fades gently, like a face seen too long ago. Some fights. Among the 12, there was one child who did not forget the sun. He had arrived later than the others. Old enough to remember trees. Old enough to remember the sound of water moving freely. Old enough to know that what was happening was wrong. His number was 7. Crow noticed him immediately. 7 did not sit as still as the others. His eyes followed the lantern when it moved. When Crow spoke, 7 listened, not with fear, but with focus. That made Crow uneasy. Memory was dangerous. 7 whispered at night when he thought the others were asleep. Soft words, broken sentences. He spoke of grass, of warmth, of running. Some children leaned toward him. Crow noticed that too. Punishment followed. 7 was separated, made to stand alone against the stone wall where the damp never dried. Food was withheld longer. Water came less often. Crow believed resistance could be starved out. But something else happened instead. 7 began counting. Not days. Crow controlled those. He counted visits, lantern appearances, footsteps above the door. He learned Crow's patterns, learned how long the door stayed open, learned when the rope was lowered and when it was forgotten. Hope, even thin hope, is loud in silence. One night, after Crow left the door open longer than usual, 7 moved. Just inches, then more. The others froze, watching, terrified to breathe. 7 reached the rope. For the first time in years, a child touched something that led upward. He did not climb. He wrapped the rope around his wrist and waited, because he knew one truth the others had forgotten. The world above still existed, and Crow had grown careless. Crow returned just before dawn. He always did. He believed discipline worked best when it interrupted hope. The door opened. Lantern light spilled down. The children shrank back into their places, hands folded, eyes low. All except 7. He was already standing. The rope tightened around his wrist as Crow stepped forward, pulling it without realizing. The tension surprised him. He looked down. For the first time in years, a child met his eyes. Not begging, not crying, remembering. 7 pulled. The rope slid from Crow's hand. The lantern crashed against the stone, bursting into sudden flame, then darkness. Smoke filled the chamber. The children screamed, not in fear, but in instinct, raw and animal, sounds they had buried for years. The earth heard them. Crow lunged forward, grabbing 7's arm. The rope burned skin as both were pulled toward the opening. For a moment, both were suspended between worlds. Crow panicked. That was the first mistake. He struck 7 hard, again and again, until the child's grip loosened. The rope slipped free. 7 fell backward into the dark. The door slammed shut. Above ground, the field was silent again. Crow stood shaking, dirt on his knees, breath ragged. He pressed his ear to the ground. Nothing. No sound rose. The earth kept its secret. Crow covered the door deeper that morning, packed soil tighter, moved the straw. He told himself it was over. Below, 7 did not move. The other children huddled around him, touching him for the first time in years. Feeling warmth, feeling fear. 7 was alive. Barely. And the children learned something new. The door could open. The earth could almost speak. And almost was not enough, but it was close. Crow did not return the next day. That alone was terrifying. Food did not come. Water did not come. The chamber stayed sealed, heavy with smoke and fear. 7 lay barely conscious. His wrist was burned raw. His breathing was shallow, uneven. The others took turns holding him upright, afraid that if they let him lie down, he would not wake again. When Crow finally came, It was not with a lantern. It was with resolve. The door opened only a crack. Light barely touched the stone. Crow did not step down. He did not look at their faces. He spoke calmly. There will be a correction. He pulled 7 forward by the rope. The children screamed. Crow ignored them. He tied 7 to the iron bars at the far end of the chamber, lifted just enough that his feet barely touched the ground. This was not rage. This was ceremony. This is mercy, Crow said, so the rest may learn. 7 did not cry out. That frightened Crow more than anything. For 3 days, 7 remained there. Food came to the others, not to him. Water came to the others, not to him. The children watched him fade. They watched his eyes lose focus. His body tremble, then still. They learned the shape of death without being allowed to grieve. On the 4th day, Crow cut him down. 7 was alive. Barely. Crow believed he had won. He did not see what he had created. The children no longer feared him. They feared losing each other more. That night, they shared water with 7. Shared warmth. Shared memory. They remembered the rope. They remembered the door. And they understood something Crow never did. Pain can break a person, but shared pain builds something else. After 7's punishment, something shifted in the dark. Not loudly. Not suddenly. It moved the way cracks move through stone. Slow, silent, and final. The children stopped correcting each other. They stopped reporting movement with their eyes. When one child shifted, the others adjusted with them, hiding it as a group. They began sharing food. One bite saved here. One swallow passed there. A hand covering another's mouth when breathing became too loud. Crow noticed the stillness. He mistook it for obedience. He spoke less when he came. Stayed shorter. He believed the lesson had taken hold. That fear had finally hollowed them into perfect shapes. But fear had changed direction. The children began counting together. Footsteps above. The sound of soil being brushed aside. How long the door stayed open. How long Crow lingered before closing it. They learned that Crow was aging. His breath grew heavier. His movement slower. His patience thinner. Once, he dropped the lantern and cursed. The children memorized that sound. 7 recovered slowly. He never stood again without shaking, but his eyes stayed sharp. He did not speak often, but when he did, the others leaned in. He told them what he remembered of the world above. Not details. Not places. Feelings. Wind on skin. Cold water on feet. The way hunger felt different when you believed it would end. Hope returned quietly. Not as belief. As planning. The children understood now. They would not be rescued. No one was coming. The church would not ask. The town would not look. God, if he existed, had been silent too long. So the children made an agreement without words. If the door opened again, they would move together. Rumors do not begin loudly. They start as discomfort. A farmhand mentioned that he heard something at night while crossing Crow's land. Not words. Not cries. Just a low sound, like wind moving through a hollow place where it shouldn't be. Another man said his dog refused to cross the backfield, dug its paws into the dirt, and whined like it smelled death. No one said the word children. Not yet. Crow noticed the shift before anyone else did. He always did. People avoided his eyes a little longer. Conversations stopped when he entered a room. The preacher spoke one Sunday about secrets and obedience, his voice tight. Crow increased his visits underground. That was a mistake. Each visit brought light. Each visit reminded the children of space above. Each visit carried risk. On the 5th night after the rumors began, Crow stayed too long. He lingered near the opening, distracted by his own thoughts, his own fear. The children moved. Not all at once. One hand first, then another, then 12 bodies rising together like a single creature. Crow turned just in time to see them. He screamed. That was the second mistake. The children rushed him. Small hands. Weak bodies. Desperation sharpened into force. They grabbed the rope, the lantern, his coat. The door shook. Crow struck back wildly, yelling scripture, names of sins, promises of punishment. But he was one man, and they were done being quiet. The struggle ended above ground. Crow fell hard, his head striking stone. He did not die, but he did not rise. The children stood blinking in open air for the first time in years. Sky. They did not run. They did not know how. They stood there shaking as dawn came, the fields bright and innocent around them. And somewhere beyond the fence line, a farmhand saw them and understood. The farmhand did not speak at first. He froze. 12 children stood in the open field like something pulled from a bad dream. Skin too pale. clothes hanging wrong, hair uneven, hacked short, or grown wild, eyes squinting against the morning light as if the sun itself was an enemy. They did not run. They did not cry. They simply stood there, swaying, unsure of what ground was supposed to feel like. The farmhand dropped his tools. He took a step back, then another, not from fear of them, but from the weight of what they meant. Children like this did not appear by accident. One of the smaller ones reached out and touched the grass. Just barely, like it might bite. Another knelt and pressed his forehead into the dirt. 7 stood apart, holding himself upright with effort, his burned wrist wrapped in a strip torn from Crow's coat. The farmhand whispered, "Jesus Christ." That was the first time any of them heard the name spoken without anger. The man ran, not away, from the truth. He ran toward town. By the time the first neighbors arrived, the children were sitting together in the field, backs to one another, forming a circle without knowing why. Instinct. Protection. No one touched them. No one knew how. Their mouths opened when spoken to, but no sound came out. Some stared through people. Some flinched at every movement. One child screamed when a hand reached too quickly. The children smelled like earth. Not dirt. Earth. And when someone finally thought to ask where they had come from, 7 lifted his shaking arm and pointed, not at the house, but at the ground. Silence spread faster than fire, because everyone understood what that meant. And no one wanted to say it out loud. No one wanted to walk onto Crow's land. They did anyway. Men from the town came first. Farmers. Church elders. A deputy who had never drawn his weapon in his life. They moved slowly, like the ground might give way beneath them. 7 walked ahead of them. Each step hurt him. Every sound felt too loud, but he knew where the door was. His body remembered even when his words would not come. He stopped in the middle of the field, pointed, at nothing. At first, they saw only soil, crops, straw flattened by feet and time. One man laughed once, sharp and nervous, and said maybe the children were confused. Then someone knelt. They brushed the dirt aside. Wood, a seam, iron. The air changed immediately. Men stepped back without knowing why. A church elder crossed himself. Another man vomited before the door was even opened. They pried it up with tools. The smell rose again, stronger this time. It hit like a wall. Stale air, damp stone, waste, sickness, and something deeply human that had no business being trapped underground. No one spoke. They lowered a lantern. The light revealed the chamber. Scratched walls, rusted bars, marks where fingernails had dug again and again into stone. A corner darkened by blood so old it had turned black. 12 places on the ground where bodies had sat for years. One man dropped the lantern. Another fell to his knees and started praying out loud, his voice shaking, words tumbling over each other too fast to mean anything. The deputy backed away and said, "Close it." He said it twice. No one moved, because closing it would mean pretending it had never been opened. And no one could do that anymore. The earth had given up its secret, and now the town had to decide what kind of people they were. The children were taken away quietly. No parade, no crowd, no public words. They were placed in homes at the edge of town. Not together. Never together. The doctor said it was for their health. The church said it was for order. The truth was simpler. They reminded people of what had been allowed. Each child carried something the town did not want to look at too closely. Nightmares. Sudden screaming. Flinching at prayer. Silence that no comfort could reach. 7 was kept alone. He frightened people. Not because he was violent, but because he remembered. When questions came from outside the county, the answers were vague. Neglect. Misguided discipline. An isolated incident. Elias Crow was found alive. Barely. He woke once. Long enough to ask if the door was sealed. Then he never spoke again. No trial followed. The church paid for his care. The town buried the matter in paperwork and sermons. The underground chamber was filled in. Dirt packed tight. Stone collapsed. The field replanted. Corn grew again. And people told themselves that meant healing. But the children never truly returned to the world. Some could not sleep indoors. Some could not stand darkness. Some could not stand light. 7 disappeared from records 2 years later. No one admitted when. No one asked where. The town went quiet in a new way. Not ignorant. Intentional. Because silence, once learned, is hard to unlearn. Time did what it always does. It moved on without asking permission. Some of the children grew older in body, but not in spirit. They learned to work. To smile when spoken to to bow their heads when adults expected it. But parts of them stayed underground. One boy never slept in a bed again. He chose the floor, wrapped in blankets, pressed close to walls. One girl screamed whenever a door closed too hard. Another refused to eat unless food was placed on the ground first. Doctors used words like shock and nerves. Preachers used words like God's will. No one used the word crime. A few of the children left town as soon as they could walk far enough. They did not say goodbye. They did not look back. Their names faded from records, replaced by marriages, moves, and silence. Two never survived winter. Their bodies failed quietly, like they had learned to do everything else. And seven was different. He was seen one last time near the old Crow land, standing at the edge of the field after sunset, watching the crops move in the wind. Listening, a man asked him what he was doing there. Seven answered softly, his voice rough from years of disuse. Making sure it stays closed. He was gone by morning. No grave, no record, no explanation, just absence. And sometimes, absence speaks louder than proof. Crow's plantation was sold within a year. No one wanted it, but land is land, and time makes people practical. New owners plowed deeper, broke more ground, tried to forget what had been found beneath it. The crops grew uneven. One strip of field never held seed. No matter how often it was replanted, the corn there came up thin, pale, twisted. Animals avoided it. Horses pulled away. Dogs refused to cross it. Men blamed the soil. They always do. At night, people walking past the land heard things they could not explain. Not voices, not words, just pressure. Like the ground was breathing wrong. Like something underneath remembered being opened. One farmer swore he heard scratching after a hard rain. He filled the area with more dirt. Another claimed the earth sank slightly every spring, as if settling around an empty space that should not exist. He sold the land. The church never spoke of Crow again. His name was removed from records quietly. His donations credited to anonymous benefactors. The pew he once sat in was replaced. It was easier that way. But memory does not need permission. Children born years later avoided that field without being told. They played everywhere else. Not there. Mothers noticed. Said nothing. The land did not forgive. It held. And sometimes, when the wind moved just right over that place, it carried a cold that did not belong to the season. Years later, a box was found in the county clerk's attic. It was not hidden. It was misplaced. Old tax rolls, land deeds, church correspondence. And at the bottom, folded so many times it looked worn thin, a single handwritten statement. And signed. Undated. It described 12 children. Not by name. By condition. Underground confinement. Extended deprivation. Religious justification. The clerk who found it read it twice. Then a third time. He asked the older clerk if there had ever been a trial connected to Elias Crow. The older man did not look up from his desk. No, he said. Some things were handled privately. The paper was never stamped. Never logged. Never sent anywhere. It went back into the box. History is not erased in big moments. It is erased in small decisions like that. The kind that feel harmless at the time. The kind that let truth suffocate quietly. You can bury a door. You can fill a hole. You cannot fully bury a story. Years passed, and the details blurred, but something remained. Parents warned children not to wander near the old field. Not with fear, just firmness. As if the land itself could hear disobedience. Teenagers dared each other to step across the thin strip where crops never grew. Most refused. A few did it laughing, then stopped laughing halfway through, unable to explain why their chests felt tight. Older folks told softer versions of the truth. They said a cruel man once lived there. They said children were mistreated. They said God judged him. They never said how, because how was too close. Once, during a hard rain, a sinkhole opened briefly near the center of the field. Just a shallow dip, gone by morning, filled in before anyone official arrived. But a boy who saw it swore he smelled something old come up with the mud. Not rot. Breath. He didn't sleep well after that. Stories like that never made it into books. They lived in pauses. In the way voices lowered. In the way people changed subjects. The children who survived grew old somewhere else. Some married. Some didn't. A few spoke of the dark, late in life. Usually after drink or illness loosened their grip. They never named Crow. They didn't have to. Because the shape of the thing was already known. When the last of the children died, nothing was announced. No shared history. No reckoning. No apology. They passed quietly, scattered across states and years, their deaths marked by ordinary causes: illness, age, accidents. Normal endings that never matched what had been done to them. But those who knew them noticed something strange. They never spoke about childhood. Not with nostalgia. Not with anger. Not even with bitterness. It was as if that part of life had been sealed off behind a door that could not be opened without losing something else. Some were gentle to a fault. Some could not stand being alone. Some could not stand being touched. One survivor was asked late in life if he believed in God. He thought for a long time. Then he said, "I believe in rooms." That was all. The dark did not just take years from them. It took language. It took trust. It took the part of the mind that believes safety is permanent. And that loss spread outward. Because trauma does not stay where it begins. It echoes through families. Through silence. Through habits no one remembers choosing. Children of the children grew up with rules that made no sense. Doors left open. Lights never turned off. Basements avoided without explanation. Fear passed down without a story. That is how the dark survives. Not as a monster. As inheritance. The field looks normal now. If you didn't know, you would never guess. Corn rises and falls with the wind. The soil is flat. The stones are gone. Nothing marks the place. That is the most unsettling part. Because places like this rarely announce themselves. Local maps no longer show the original boundaries of Elias Crow's land. The plantation house is gone. The church has been rebuilt twice. Names have changed, but the ground remembers. Every generation, someone notices that one strip of land never grows right. That animals pause there. That sound behaves strangely, as if the air presses back. No one digs. They don't need to be told why. This story was never written into official history. There are no monuments, no plaques, no lessons taught in school. And yet, some truths survive without records. They survive in warnings that sound like superstition. In family rules no one questions. In the instinct to step around certain places. The children were never given justice. But they were not erased. Because somewhere beneath that field, beneath layers of dirt and years and willful forgetting, there was once a door. And once you know a door like that existed, you listen differently to the ground beneath your feet.